Welcome to the Curiosity Crisis. We challenge ourselves to explore the world of business, tech, investing, and science. Get curious and be part of the journey as we discuss, challenge, and learn. So today we are doing a 2023 wrapped and a bit of a 2024 outlook episode. We're going to wrap our favorite topics and the big stories that we've talked about this year up in this episode and then look forward in those trends going forward. So we'll talk about markets, crypto, renewables, AI, and EVs. Lukey, how are you, mate?
Very well, thanks. And we're also going to do a little prediction at the end as well.
Yeah, super keen. We'll launch straight into it because we've got a lot of content today. What is keeping you curious at the moment?
So I have learnt about Enron and the fraudulent collapse of the company. And it's relevant for us because we both operate within the utilities industry. And so I've learned about the impact that that's had, mark-to-market accounting, mark-to-model accounting, what all this meant, what's kind of happened after this has all occurred, and yeah, just how it's kind of impacted the industry and really changed things forever. So yeah, that's me. What about you?
Damn, that sounds interesting, and I reckon in a way we could do we like doing thesis episodes, so like what's good about companies in industries, but we could do a failures episode. We could do like Enron and FTX or something. That'd be fun. What's keeping me curious? Well, in theme with the episode, actually 2024 is keeping me curious. I'm very keen for the year ahead, but lots happening. I'm moving cities, so keen for that and curious to see what it brings. But I think it's one of your favorite quotes actually that I learned off you. It's like people underestimate or overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in, I think it was like 2 or 5 or 10
years,
or something.
Yeah, 2.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
24 months is a long time once you get the first 12 cracking,
Yeah, and for me, I think a lot of things are continuing on, so pretty excited for that. Anyway, to launch into it, let's jump into markets. I think you're going to start us off.
Yeah, we're going to just do a bit of a recap on investments and markets and kind of what's happened in terms of finance across the last 12 months. One of the big ones has been inflation. So every country has had inflation and it has increased interest rates. So that's gone worldwide. That's one of the big ones. Mm-hmm. The Federal Reserve obviously kind of leading the charge. They went in pretty early. There's a good chance they'll reduce them significantly in 2024. But one of the other big things that happened in the US was also the debt ceiling was reached. That was a big one. We also had 3 bank failures. I think only 2 of them were in the US. That was the Silicon Valley Bank, Credit Suisse, and First Republic Bank. And that was their second largest banking collapse since Lehman Brothers. And then First Republic overtook Silicon Valley Bank as the new second biggest. So they haven't had banking collapses like this since since 2008, which is insane.
Since the GFC.
Yeah, since the GFC, exactly. So that was crazy. And to cap the year off, we had gold up 16%, oil down 8%, and Bitcoin up 161%, which is pretty crazy. But that just goes to show that, even in markets that had this much turmoil, there were still some things that were up, which is interesting. And that those were the safe havens, but oil was down, I think is quite, that's pretty interesting to me. And then I think the other big one was the China real estate collapse. So they had Evergrande, that was in 2022, and then they had Country Garden in 2023. That's a real problem for them. They've basically been able to have unlimited growth essentially by just pumping money into real estate. And I guess when you don't play your cards right in real estate and selling things that aren't actually developed yet, you can have a lot of problems. And I'll leave it with the last one as well, which was the WeWork collapse, which was the US's biggest startup failure in history. So they filed for, I think, Chapter 11 or Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And that happened, in 2023 as well. So, there was a lot that happened,
Well, so a couple of things that stick out to me there is, in theory, all of that is bad. Well, no, a lot of that was bad news, and in theory, it should have affected markets very negatively. But overall, across the year, we're significantly up in the major markets. The S&P 500s is well up, and it has had a bit of a big run in the last quarter of the year. With inflation up to like 10.5% in the UK, That's pretty crazy. And in Australia here, that we had 12 interest rate rises within 13 months, which is unheard of since the very cheap money years of COVID. It's crazy to see that this has been like an overall good year for equity markets. So giving a prediction out of that is going to be absolutely ridiculous.
I can't wait.
Yeah, no, big year. Do you want to do the predictions now or at the end?
Let's do them now. We'll do them for each section.
Yeah, okay. What do you reckon? What do you reckon happens looking in 2024 in markets? I'm going to focus on equity markets, but you can do whatever.
For me, the big one is going to be interest rates are going to drop back down. I think that's going to be interesting. But I think a lot of people are thinking they're going to completely go back to the lows that we previously had. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to find a bit of a middle ground where they decrease, but they don't get super cheap. We're not going to have money that's super, super cheap, I don't think. I think especially the US is walking a bit of a fine line because they kept increasing interest rates. Then they had banking collapses. That was more to do with their bonds, I think. But then they basically stopped increasing them. And I think that's what's going to be really interesting. What about you?
Yeah. Well, I think, I agree with that. I think interest rates are going to start coming down. Not that we've really seen that in Australia, but inflation has come down. I think now it's like in the 4% range here. But
I think it peaked out at around 7 point something.
Yeah, and now it's starting to come down like the inflation has. So interest rates should follow that, and the market's been really hot on the back of that news, I think. But I think markets are very forward-looking, so they might be pricing in interest rates coming back down to very cheap money levels like COVID. So I think, if interest rates come down, historically risky assets do better. So like crypto and equities would do better. But this year it's been full of bad news and we've still had a good year on equities. So I'm going to go contrarian and I think it's going to be a bad year. I think people are going to be over exuberant, realize we're not getting cheap interest rates, and I think we're going to end all our major markets lower at the end of 2024.
Really?
I'm just going to throw it out there. Yeah.
Wow,
prediction.
Okay. Interesting. I didn't expect that. I was waiting for you to just kind of rein it in a little bit. I didn't think you'd go full contrarian. That's interesting. Okay. I wasn't ready for that.
Well, 2023 was full contrarian, so why not?
True. All right. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, I guess following markets, the next thing would be crypto and what's going on with that. It's a market of itself, I guess. If we look back at 2023, we can see some major things that happened. One was the Ethereum layer 2 growth and the token drops, which was for layer 2s especially. So Coinbase had Base come out. Arbitrum had the ARB token drop, and Optimism had the OP token drop as well. So that's huge growth there. But I think, that's really positive for Ethereum. And I think what's not so positive for the industry was the Binance CEO, CZ, stepping down and having some criminal charges, which is crazy. Money laundering, essentially. So that was a very interesting one. We had Coinbase and Binance, both of them were sued. Coinbase stock price absolutely exploded towards the back end of the year.
Yeah.
We were expecting a Bitcoin ETF approval from BlackRock or Fidelity or a bunch of other kind of OG, Wall Street players, and that didn't happen, which is interesting. They had the FedNow CBDC launch, which was the essentially digital US dollar launched, which was rather uneventful, to be honest. Sam Bankman-Fried was found guilty and was sentenced to prison, which is good. And I'd say the last one, which did happen towards the end of the year, was SafeMoon LLC filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and is being investigated for securities fraud, which is really good because they were one of the, I guess, quote unquote scams that were just straight up basically saying, we'll make you heaps, and they had nothing to back it up. So I think that's really good.
Wow. Yeah. It seems like it's been a bit of a, not a consolidation year, a bit of a clear out year in crypto, Well, Binance CEO gone, I suppose the whole of FTX gone, and obviously Sam Bankman-Fried with that gone, and then SafeMoon as well. So maybe, we're starting to clean up the industry and it becomes less of that Wild West that I think we've talked about once before.
It's hard to know. I mean, it could be another shocker of a year. We've had 2 years in a row where we've had significant issues with large exchanges, FTX and then Binance back to back. So who knows? But at the same time, I think one of the benefits is that, those huge players are gone now. I mean, obviously Binance isn't gone, they're still operating, but I think it will add regulatory clarity, but that also could be a bad thing. So we'll wait and see. I think it's very up in the air as to how it goes. The Bitcoin halvening will happen in 2024, so I think that's interesting. But as you said before, everything's priced in. You know, you think of it, it's already priced in. You think of that's priced in. So we'll see.
Well, okay. Well, I'm not going to let you get away with saying we'll see in the spirit of our predictions episode. So what's your outlook for crypto 2024?
I think it will be a much better year than 2023. I think my main prediction is that a spot Bitcoin ETF will be approved of some description. And I think it's unlikely that a spot Ethereum ETF will be approved. But I think that when that news does happen, it will be quite a big pump. And I think it will happen in 2024. I don't know when, but I think it will. Yep. That's my prediction.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Do you have anything?
Not crazily big, but I think that, look, everything I read is that institutional investing is getting more excited and interested in the crypto space. So I think that's going to continue to have a bit more of an uptick. And I think there's a couple of key moments with that. One is just what you said, the Bitcoin spot ETF being created, because that makes it so much easier for institutions to get involved and have some portion of their assets in crypto. So that's probably my big one. And if regulation and regulatory clarity comes through, again, that supports the institutional buy-in to crypto. So as that happens, it becomes more mainstream. So I think it could be a year of growth of awareness and growth of acceptance of crypto. So,
just for clarity, there actually is a BTC ETF, and I believe it's run by Grayscale. But the difference here is that it's not a spot ETF, which means that you're not actually trading on the spot price. You're trading on portions of BTC that a company owns, and they can essentially charge what they will like. So there's usually a premium, and it's not. There's basically a lot of implications with it. So that's kind of the point is if it's a spot ETF, it's exactly based on the value of the asset, which is way more interesting to institutions. So yeah.
Right. Well, thank you for that. That was a very hard prediction to make, but it's always good fun. I might take on the renewables and the energy transition piece. So just the big news in that, unfortunately, I have not much good news to start with. Global emissions of carbon dioxide rose to about 41 billion tons. So that's not all greenhouse gases. That's not CO2e, but it rose, and no surprises, the majority of that, about 37 billion, was from fossil fuels, so burning fossil fuels. And that, I think I read it was a record. So not good news there. And if these carbon dioxide emission levels persist, there's about a 50% chance that our climate system would reach that 1.5 degrees of warming above pre-industrial levels in about 7 years. So at 2030. And that's what the Paris Agreement commits to trying to prevent happening. So obviously, a lot needs to be done, but I'll give you the other side of the coin, which is essentially that renewable energy installation surged by 107 gigawatts to reach 440 gigawatts total. So you can see a massive growth there. Solar was two-thirds of that, and there's been a crazy uptick, which obviously we've definitely seen in Australia, of rooftop solar, so on homes. And then I think China was the leader overall, accounting for 55% of global additions of renewable capacity in the last 2 years. So it's projected to keep growing, and that's by policy adoption from the big players, way higher fossil fuel prices. So everyone would know that if you're filling up your car at a petrol station, you're paying a lot more than you were probably 2 or 3 years ago. And energy security concerns. So there's been a lot of onshoring. So typically oil and gas comes from big players that gets piped in, for example, from Russia to Europe. But a lot of that has been sort of taken into a country's own hands by producing their own energy there. So I'll talk about EVs later. And obviously renewables are really starting to see a bit of that quick uptick in installation. But why are we still emitting more? Essentially, it's because everything's getting back to pre-COVID levels. So all the emissions are pumping them out. But the problem is that the renewables and EVs, as we've talked about before, are the easy solutions. So emissions still growing, but that's because decarbonizing the big things like heavy industry and producing materials such as steel, cement, and plastic are still emitting a hell of a lot. So I think just a lot of R&D needs to go into that space before we can really start seeing some headway and progress.
Yeah. And what's your prediction for renewables?
Well, I'll start it off negative, so I'm going to finish optimistically.
Okay, I like that. I like that.
So the thing is, with all these solutions, it takes time for things to show results. So, for example, it's been a long time for us, or in Australia especially, to achieve emissions reductions initially, but they're starting to increase a bit more quickly. So at this stage, we'll hit 37% by 2030, 37% reduction on 2005 levels, but we are, with additional measures, can hit 42%. And then also the big things are starting to happen. So an example, which used to be Australian, but now it's global, the company FFI, or Fortescue Future Industries, has been all over COP28 and all over the world touting what they're doing. But they've got, actual solutions being demonstrated, such as green ammonia shipping, eliminating diesel from their heavy operations, and building electrolyzer factories. So all that's very hard and takes a long time and requires a lot of capital, but it's starting to happen. So I think, in the next couple of years, the fruits of the labor with renewables and EVs will start to show a bit more. But then also some of that big stuff is starting to kick off. And I think if we talk about technology S-curves, we're going to see progress a bit later on. So we're going to keep pushing really hard, but that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. So our next topic is AI, which I think is potentially one of the most interesting ones, simply because it involves the whole NASDAQ. If you're on the NASDAQ and you're not involved, you're in trouble. So I think it's actually pretty easy. And that is that, we've seen a bunch of ChatGPT clones, essentially. A lot of LLMs release. We had Bard, we had Llama, we had Grok, we had heaps of them. And I think that's going to be really interesting. And I think one of the big things that happened as well was that ChatGPT went multimodal, which essentially means that it's not just text anymore. It could do other things. And I think that was a huge step forward. And I think that will probably be a theme in 2024 as well. I think, we had a huge amount of growth in that space. Everyone was claiming to be involved with it. Was also a little bit of a funny one. And I would say the big one for the whole year was actually nothing to do with AI at all, but an indirect connection, which was a GPU shortage. The absolute mooning of Nvidia stock, and just the way
we talked about this, didn't we?
Yeah, essentially the shovels in the gold mine, or the picks in the gold rush scenario. And I think that's really interesting. And I'll make this one quick because it's hard. There's a lot of moving parts, but I would say that my prediction for this is that video generation is going to grow significantly after some of the image generation that we had a lot of progression in. I think that the fake generation of images is going to pose a real big problem. And I think that the solution to that is going to end up being blockchain. Funnily enough, that's a bit of a hot take.
Wow.
And I think that the last one is that someone or multiple companies are going to integrate AI, as in LLMs, and the progression there into assistants. So like Siri or Google Assistant or whatever. And I think that the last one will be the growth of micro models. So really small models that run locally on things like a watch or a phone. I think that that's my prediction for what changes, I guess.
Wow. Okay. So hang on. I'll pull you up quickly.
Right.
Micro models. So there's local AIs, so AIs that aren't learning from a massive global data set. They're learning from a local device and application specific data set.
Instead of being, 500 billion parameters, they might be a little small 7 billion, and it can actually run locally, and it's still really useful. I think those are going to have real growth, and people are going to find great ways of optimizing it without throwing, infinite data and compute at it. I think that will be a big change. Yeah.
Okay, so the lack of the need of crazy amounts of computing to improve and keep iterating. And then quickly, assistance integration, is that already happening or it's in the works? Because obviously, you can use some of these AIs as your helper, but it's not in those, what is it, Amazon home
like
systems.
Alexa or like, I mean directly into one of those where it can do way more. And I think the one of the reasons why it hasn't happened is because you unlock the door a bit. Like suddenly it can do a bunch of things or it can't do a bunch of things where you ask it to do something, but it can't actually, open your app and do something. But I think that will be a big, big change. And I don't know who's going to do it first, but I think, that's a big one.
quick one. Then speaking on opening the door, what happens in terms of the ethics space of AI? Because we did see one of the other big things is Sam Altman got fired and rehired. And I think that was around, I don't know the full details. I don't think anybody fully knows unless you're in that boardroom. But that was around ethics with AI.
Yeah.
What happens in that space? If you've got any bold predictions?
I don't know. I think it's there'll be more regulation. I don't know whether this is the year for it. It might be next year. I'm not sure, but I think it'll continue to be more significant. But I actually have a feeling that this might be the year that people really realize that it's important, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's, the people are aware of it, but it's not like really a thing. And then this year it'll be like, whoa, we need some controls around AI. This is crazy. And I think a lot of that will actually come off the back of fake images. But yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, it seems like that's a theme around all of these spaces that we're talking, because they're all so fast moving that, traditional regulation stuff has not kept up or cannot keep up because it's so, Well, all right. I'll jump into in the interest of time, the last topic that we talked about obviously this year and we'll probably continue to look at going forward, and it's electric vehicles. So I'll try and keep it short, but essentially this is good news in terms of the transition. Global plug-in vehicle registrations were up 45% late in the year compared to late in 2022. So that's a hell of a lot more. The market share was 35% in China by the end of the year. China was 35% plus. Norway hit a 90% market share, and this is of new vehicles being bought. And then Australia was less than 10%, and US hit just about 10%. The thing is, in the smaller markets, the growth rate is crazy year on year. It's nearly 40, 50, 60%. But it's pretty good to see some of the major markets, namely China and some of the European markets, hitting a big market share in new vehicles sold. But the issue, I suppose, is that doesn't represent all the cars that are currently on road. Yeah. So, EVs would make up a small portion of that. So one of the big things that this means is, and I was reading a little bit about this, is in terms of new cars sold, it's kind of getting into the disruption zone of an S-curve. So if you imagine, a tech adoption S-curve, and a good example in sort of this space is solar panels on home solar panels. So, once they hit that one of those inflection points, now they are, on 2/3 or more of roofs in Australia and a lot of the developed world. So they've really seen a massive uptick, and they're one of the biggest contributors to energy systems in those countries. So if the world hits that with electric vehicles, which I think is entirely possible within the next 2 or 3 years, we can really see some crazy market shares of electric vehicles. So a couple of big things this year, I suppose the best seller of EVs was Tesla's Model Y, followed by BYD's Song car, but that was both plug-in hybrid and battery, and then followed by Tesla's Model 3. The Cybertruck was released, which is obviously big news, finally. And the biggest sales in the world by brand was BYD, by beating Tesla, but they're on the same sort of order of magnitude. So the two big players, Tesla and BYD, absolutely dominated. But yeah, they're continuing to grow. And I suppose looking forward, they need to grow. For example, for Australia to hit our climate emission targets, we need to hit 50% of new cars sold by 2030 to be electric. And that's probably mirrored mostly around the world, because I suppose our current targets are in line with the Paris Agreement. So any country that is the same needs high EVs. Yeah. But I think that's looking likely for EVs. I'm pretty bullish because, in the countries that have seen those massive uptakes, so you're thinking China, Germany, Norway, there's been really ambitious government policies, vehicle tax incentives, subsidies, and basically just making EVs cheaper and more accessible. Yep. And the rest of the world is learning that. So you're seeing some of those come through. For example, in Australia, the national EV strategy was released. So that's sort of starting to happen. But then also on the consumer side, there's been crazy high fuel prices, which might incentivize people to buy EVs. And that's all over the world. It's not discriminatory only to developed countries. Yeah. And then softer battery prices actually could bring cars down. I know when I was doing research a few years ago on EVs, it was said that 2024, 2025 was when a lot of EVs start hitting price parity with their internal combustion counterparts. So, that very well could happen this year. I think it will. And I think the next year will be a big one, and we'll get into that, the steep part of the S-curve. So EVs, I think, will start taking off.
Do you have any predictions? Do I dare ask about potential stock price changes?
Oh, dearie me. I'm not even convinced that nowadays growth rates of EVs are, related to stock price for EV companies. I think it's more about, margins, economies of scale, who can produce cheaper, who can do it more sustainably, longer term. So I think that's probably the thing to watch. I think, it's also about that infrastructure piece. So another thing was in Australia, for example, in 2023, 57% more public charges were installed than the year before. So that's good, and that's sort of growing around the world. But that definitely needs to continue to make sure that they're actually integratable into our society.
Well, that's the key piece for a lot of countries, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like for us, yeah.
Can the grid cope? Can you install the chargers enough? Can it be supported?
Yeah.
Just like fuel cars have. Do you have any predictions around EVs?
Not really. I mean, I think for the next few years, it'll continue to be the most interesting year in terms of EVs.
That's true.
Simply because you're going to have more adoption and more production. And I think that means you get more competition, which means it's more interesting for the consumer, which means for us, it's more it's just good to watch, But I don't think I have any particular predictions.
I think the experience part is very important as well. So like experience of actually, driving them and getting them out. What happens to batteries longer term? So, no, very interesting. Quick one. When are you buying your Tesla?
Mate. Oh, do I ever want one? I really do, but I don't think this is the year for it. Unfortunately, I've done a little bit of research on solid state batteries, and it's pushed me to hang on a little bit. So we'll see. I don't know, but not this year. I think is the answer. Unfortunately,
for a while I thought you were definitely going to be first, but it might be a race between us now.
Oh, really?
Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe I will get one then.
All right. Any closing thoughts? Any other wild, crazy predictions that you have for 24, or big reflections from 23?
I disagree with your contrarian view. I think, I don't think it's going to be worse than 23. That's for sure.
I'm talking purely on market return. So I can't remember. I don't know exactly how far
I reckon.
500
I think it'll be better.
You reckon?
I think it'll be better. I think it'll be good.
Okay. Well, you've priced. Everyone's priced in everything, so you've priced in that it's gonna be better, and I've priced in. No, I haven't.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing out my contrarian view.
I like it though. I think it's a good take. I think it's a wrong take, but I think it's good. It's good.
The only thing that's guaranteed about predictions is that they're wrong in some way, shape.
Yeah,
or form.
true. Yeah, thanks for listening to this, and look, all of this is completely wrong. So,
hey, well, at least we're having a crack. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then we'll wrap up there. Thanks for listening. Find us at curiositycrisis.com and Curiosity Crisis on Instagram. We're also on LinkedIn. We're on the major streaming services, so you can listen how you like. I've got a favor to ask. It's not the usual one. If you got anything out of this episode or you enjoyed it, could you please go to your podcast player and give us a 5-star review? That would mean a lot and help us get found by the next person. So thank you, Lukey, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.